Can you explain to people why an ice age isn't like the movie? I think the common perception for humans is when it's an ice age, everything in the world is completely frozen over. Nothing can live except a little squirrel with acorns.
It's called the ice age.
And it makes sense.
We're in the fucking ice age. We're still in it. Like we're in an interglacial period in an ice age right now.
So if there's glaciers,
it's 53 degrees in New York while we're filming this.
Yeah,
ice age is
actually
fire.
nice. Ice ages are great. Well, yeah, it's not snowball Earth. Like it's not this planet snowball idea. You know, millions and millions of years ago, there may have been periods like that. But no, Ice Age and the glacial maximum refers to like when we had the Laurentide, the Cordilleran and the European glaciers, you know, these 2 miles of ice that were sitting up on top of the northern hemisphere of the planet. It was generally colder, but there were plenty of temperate zones and even tropical zones along the equator.
So essentially it's a percentage of glacial ice that qualifies a time period to be an ice age.
They generally go on like the extent of the glaciers. And so we can see from, you know, glacial till and the moraines and all of these geological features about how far the glaciers extended. You know, we would have been buried under a couple of miles of ice right here back, you know, in that period. But it's you know, it's also, you know, the sea levels were 400 feet lower because all that water's up on the land now and all that melts, sea levels rise, all that stuff. And yeah, so that abruptly ended. And so we've known, it's kind of interesting, it's all work that's happened in the last couple decades, really, that has really advanced our understanding of what occurred at the end of that last glacial maximum. Because it was violent. Like, that's the thing. It turns out it was tremendously violent. Like
again, so we understand this. The Younger Dryas is the Ice Age, or is the violent time?
The Younger Dryas is essentially the boundary between what we would call the Pleistocene, which was the glacial, like the end of the, like we would generally call it the Ice Age, but that's like the glacial maximum, and the Holocene, which is the era we're in now. This nice warm weather that's been pretty stable for, you know, 10,000 years or so. Like that's where we live. It's the reason.
So this is the transition.
It's the reason why we've got a civilization.
Got you.
The Younger Dryas is the transition point between that. And it gets crazy wacky in terms of, so we're kind of...
something happened 12,000 years ago.
Yeah, 12,800 years ago. It's a period between 12,800 years ago and 11,600 years ago. And if you go back, it's this tumultuous time. So we kind of have learnt this from ice core data. So we go and drill down in Antarctica and Greenland, and we drill down, because right down into the ice, and you extract these big tubes of ice, because every year, you know, the snowfall gets laid down on there and it's compacted, and you can do analysis on it and look at things like oxygen isotopes and determine temperature and accumulation of snow and all these different things about the past.
So a similar thing almost like with trees and rings.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're doing that with ice.
With ice, and you can go back hundreds of thousands of years. So what we've learned is that something happened. Like, we're coming out of this more or less warm, gentle, we're warming up from this, you know, glacial maximum, but then all of a sudden it just goes boom down to these severe cold for like, you know, 800 years, and then it's boom, jacked back up again by another event, and then it's this gentle warming thing that gets us up to more or less the temperature we have now. But there's this really violent period in between called the Younger Dryas. You go back further, there's ups and downs as well, but the other thing that correlates to the Younger Dryas is this extinction event. We've known about that forever, right? We've dug up mammoth bones and, you know, saber-toothed tigers and American lions and short-faced bears, like all these giant animals. It's not the dinosaurs, but they were here.
Animals that exist now.
Animals, well, no, animals that were here, but only some 12 to 13,000 years ago. So it's the megafauna extinction. Think about the mammoths. Like, some people get
megafauna for the people.
Well, megafauna is like any mammal or large animal with a body weight, I think, over like 40 kilograms, so 80 pounds. Yeah, humans? Woolly mammoth. We are megafauna. Yeah.
Oh, us too.
Me in particular.
100 pounds, 40 kilograms.
Wow.
Definitely megafauna. Yeah, so 80 pounds-ish, something, 90 pounds, something like that. So, and the crazy thing is, as many species of megafauna that there are alive today, that's basically how many went extinct in a very short period of time. Also in that Younger Dryas period, like 11,600 to 12,800.
So Younger Dryas is not the event, it's the time period during after the event, before things start to normalize.
Yeah, so it's this period of time where it's this tumultuous time. We've got these crazy swings in temperatures. We've got these massive sea level, like these meltwater pulses where the sea level rises tremendously, very violently, and we've got an extinction event now. All tied into this one period from ice core samples, and now, since 2007, there's more than 160 papers that have also shown there was a cosmic impact at that time. So digging in that layer, so in that same layer in the dirt, you dig down in the strata layers, you can date all that stuff, where those megafauna bones are, a lot of the extinction bones at that same layer, that's where we find what you call impact proxies, so shock synthesized nanodiamonds.
What does that mean?
So it's basically the impact, and it's the byproducts of extreme heat and pressure, and like soot layers and carbon and like all of these different indicators of basically cosmic impacts, like these gigantic explosions.
So this is what the Carolina Bays thing is?
Well, the Carolina Bays may or may not. It seems like it ties into this event, but no.
Let's not go there then.
Yeah, it's like a fallout. It's almost like splash damage. It's Carolina Bays is just a byproduct almost of a big cosmic impact. This is like the same. This is like just unimaginably violent events. These cosmic, either it's airbursts or it's huge impacts of stuff that's like a mile, 2 mile wide, coming in at 40,000 kilometers a second kind of thing. And just pounding into the earth, and then it creates these tellers, these microscopic telltale signatures like magnetic carbon spherules, shock synthesized nanodiamonds. There's a whole list of them. There's all these a lot of these scientific papers that have now figured that out.
Evidence of impact.
They call it impact proxies. Yeah, so it's the thing we don't quite have at craters. Now that's stuff that Randall is working on, but you've got to also imagine some of these impacts. They might not have all been impacts. They might have been airbursts. There was a good.
What is an airburst? Sorry.
So it's where it blows up before it hits the ground.
It's kind of what we see now with like shooting stars and stuff like that.
Yeah, there was a big one in Tunguska in Siberia.
Yeah, that's the Russian one.
Yeah, the Russian one.
But isn't that impact though?
No, it was an airburst. It was an airburst.
But
I thought it flattened a giant area. It was only a tiny little rock compared to what we would.
So it flattened an area despite it being an airburst.
Oh yeah, think of like a big bomb going off. It's just a shockwave comes down and just goes.
Oh, maybe we can even
problems.
get a picture up of that to show it because it still hasn't even recovered.
Yeah, in Siberia, right. Well, there's pictures of all these just trees knocked down by matchsticks, but like acres and acres of it. Yeah, Tunguska.
So some people go, well, where are the craters if there's this massive impact? And what you're saying is you don't need a crater in order for the impact to have extreme damage.
Well, that's right. So you might have some remnant. It could have been an airburst. A lot of people mistake the research. The latest research really shows it was a series of impacts. It was or airburst. It wasn't just like one big one. There was a whole range of them.
Yep.
It's like an asteroid belt almost.
It was actually a disintegrating comet. This is a funny thing. So it's a comet Enki. Now this came into our solar system a long time ago. It's been broken up. There's actually it's formed what's a meteor stream. It runs around the sun and loops out. And we cross through it twice a year. It's the Taurid meteor stream. I think it's like June and October. So we sort of cross over it twice, right?
I think Graham talked about it in his series.
He does. And it's like, we don't know if there's large chunks still in this. Like we do run into this same period. And there's a lot related to that time period in October. The Chicago fires I think it's like 18 or 19 something.
The Great Chicago Fire?
The Great Chicago Fire
was started by a comet?
It may have been an airburst or it might have been a remnant or even a gas bubble that came in from something, because it also on the same day you had the Peshtigo forest fire, which was like, I think in southern Canada or somewhere like that. It's one of the craziest stories you'll ever hear, because this huge area in the same time frame, this massive fire spread like it's unimaginable conflagration, as well as what happened in Chicago, all in that same time period, the same time period when Tunguska hit, that same time of year when we're crossing this meteor stream. So it's like, this is not always these little shooting stars aren't always the friendliest of things. I think a lot of that ties back to this meteor stream and potentially this this
event. Blew my mind a little bit when I was watching Graham's piece, because I think my perception is probably similar to most people, which is like there's been a couple comets that hit the Earth, like 1 or 2 every 65 million years, and then it's done. And then Mark showed me this picture of all the comets that have hit the Earth, right? He just sends me the picture. He goes, hey, look at this. And then I look and I go, wow, that's a lot of comets. And then on the bottom of the picture goes, since 1994.
Yeah.
I thought this was all that ever hit it. So, and I think it was, I don't know if it was you, but I know Rogan was messaging me about this too. Yeah, here's a picture.
1994 to 2013.
Just in 2013.
What, 19 years?
That's crazy. So, and then Rogan said this as well to me. He's like, yeah, we're in a shooting gallery. And
cosmic shooting gallery.
And it's better we don't think about things like this, by the way.
True.
It's better we assume it's just a big one hits and then like, okay, that's why there's that little hole near Cancun and then the dinosaurs go away and then we're back to normal.
Yeah.
It's better for the average person because I don't recycle as it is now. But if you told me it's possible that next year we're going to get hit by some big shit, I'm not recycling ever. I'm not going to do a single good thing for the environment.
Yeah,
like,
I was thinking that. Like, dude, these political arguments we have, like, how many genders are there? Have a million. Who gives a fuck?
Yeah, it's over.
We're going to die in 4 days anyway.
Baby.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so this is happening between 12 and
11,006.
11,000 years ago.
So that's the Younger Dryas period, right? So, and that's the true key to me that unlocks the story of civilization, because if that event happened today to us, our civilization is gone. If we survive it, we will be knocked back to hunter-gatherers, and in a generation or two, we'll be sitting around the campfire telling ghost stories about plasma TVs and dancing around with black shiny rocks, trying to turn it on and say, well, this thing will give you answer to anything and you can talk to someone on the other. You know, it's magic.
Can you paint that picture a little bit? Like, if Younger Dryas happens today, like, what happens geopolitically? Like, does a wave come in?
It happens to the entire world.
It depends where it lands, what happens. I mean, if you're anywhere near the actual impact site or the areas, I mean, you're just gone.
Every building
gone. Done. I mean, if you're anywhere near it, just instantly disintegrated.
The entire planet?
Well, if it's big enough, I mean, that's the problem, is that you go back far enough in these extinction events. I mean, some of them have eliminated like 99.9% of Earth, of life on the planet. If that happens, it's game over. Like, we're back to microbes and let's start again. But it's, you know, we're back to rats. It's whatever the hell crawls out of the pond the next time, and give it a billion years and see where we end up. But it's, no, if something mediums or relatively small, Younger Dryas, I mean, that's an extinction event, right? It knocked humans around, knocked off half of the big animals on the planet at the time, all of the woolly mammoths. I mean, there's literally anything near that event. We see this in some of the bones of these mammoth graves, right? It's absolutely crazy. Think about an elephant's femur, how much force it takes to break the femur of an elephant. There's literally... These elephants had their feet in mud and their leg bones are just snapped clean off, and there's hip bones up near their heads and they're just jumbled up. There's whole caves.
I get what you're saying. You're basically looking at this skeleton and you've never seen an elephant skeleton being absolutely destroyed like this.
Destroyed.
And there isn't an animal big enough that's alive that's going to do it. It's not like there's some King Kong that's running around snapping elephant legs, right?
Yeah,
it has to be, they're either falling off a cliff.
Well, their feet are in the ground. Like, there's literally, they're stuck, so their feet are still in this mud, and then their bones are snapped off and they're all jumbled up. I mean, there's...
Oh, so they're standing there and then they just got smacked.
Like this shockwave hits them. Yeah. In other places, there's all these megafaunas, mixed up bears and tigers and cats and trees, and just this, like, forest just all smashed up and jumbled together. They found
like
finds
a landslide.
like that. Like a landslide, but it's much more violent. Like, it's essentially, I think what you're looking at is these things were hit by a shockwave as a result of this. Now, painting the picture, if it hits anywhere near an ocean, or if it lands in an ocean, tsunamis. Like, so you have these, you know, giant tsunamis moving at the speed of sound that might be half a mile high or whatever. It's just going to water destroys everything, knocks out all the cities. You probably have. I mean, forget electricity and grids and stuff. I actually think this is why some governments around the world are making these giant underground bases, which may have also been what happened in the past. Because
that's what happened in Turkey, right?
Well, Derinkuyu, yeah, but also Egypt. There's evidence for this all over the world. And, you know, there's all sorts of strange stories.
Colorado, the airport.
Yeah, Colorado, exactly. The airport, the Cheyenne Mountain up there in Colorado. That's like where NORAD is and everything. There's giant underground bunkers you can go. I saw a TikTok of a guy driving a big-ass truck, and you can just, like, huge cabins.
And this isn't even conspiracy. This is known, right? Like it's like a doomsday bunker. Well,
I don't know if you say doomsday, but yeah, it's an underground bunker that's as big as, or twice as big as the airport or whatever.
Yeah. And they can hold like 4,000 people or something like that. This is massive. End of civilization shit.
But the government's thinking about it. I saw an RFP. I know a guy who knows a guy who is involved in some government stuff. They put out an RFP.
What does that mean?
Like a request for proposal for tech companies to go, we need a drone system. You know, the Prometheus movie?
Yep.
Where they throw it up in the air and runs off and maps these underground. But they wanted that type of system that can work without GPS because they're interested in fighting wars in underground cities.
Because they think that's where it might go.
Where it might go in the future, so they're trying to prepare
crazy
for
they're
tech.
thinking about war even after a mass extinction event.
I mean, like...
That's us, man.
If there's an extinction level event, there's going to be violence followed very quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the
It's
first
Last
time
of
it
Us.
survives.
Yeah.
You would love a series about this.
It depends where you are on the planet and if how your luck holds wherever you are. I mean,
What were you saying about the Turkey thing, or?
Darren Kuyu?
Yeah.
Well, so there's evidence for underground cities, ancient underground cities as well.
Yeah,
And
all over.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely places like Cappadocia and Darren Kuyu in Turkey, they could have held hundreds of thousands of people.
Have you seen any of these?
No,
This is incredible.
Yeah.
So they basically carve cities out underground with access to air.
Yep.
And water. There's
water
underground
as
rivers.
wells.
So they knew where the
crazy.
river was and the water line was.
That's
so you
crazy.
have everything you need, but I
And
think
that
I was
speaks to being very advanced.
100%.
Underground city, and we know where the water is, you know how to access the water.
And how many people could they hold?
Well, Darren Kuyu, I'm pretty sure was the figures. I think
Look at that.
That's only a tiny part of it. I think
like an ant
it
colony.
could have been 100. I've heard up to like hundreds of thousands of people. Certainly more than 50,000 people. Same thing in Egypt, and there's rumours of this stuff all over the place. I mean, there's giant underground networks of tunnels underneath Saqqara, I think underneath Giza, all over Egypt.
Now, is it possible that they're using this during the time where there's tons of comet impact?
I think that's probably why. I mean, it speaks to someone who they may have known it was coming. Like you've got these indicators, like if the Sphinx is marking the age of Leo, and you've got these alignments, I mean, they're pointing at that for a reason, because that time period is also that of cataclysm, right? It's, at least in the last precessional cycle, the last 26,000 year period, it kind of lines up to it. And Göbekli Tepe, there's a lot of research done into that side as well. It may be an astronomical calendar and a historical one, but it seems to point at this time. It's like they're transmitting a message down through time. It's possible. That's telling us, look at this time, like this time means something. This was bad, like figure it out. And if they knew it was coming, maybe they were preparing these things as, you know, the doomsday bunkers, a place you could survive until it was, the outside was nice enough to come back out and go, holy shit.
What's the stone that has the different constellations on it in Göbekli Tepe? Graham talked about in the...
it's like Pillar 13 or Pillar
7 or something
Closure
like
5
that.
or whatever. Yeah, I'm not 100%.
But basically has this like, maybe he might be taking liberties on it, but like they have an organization of the constellations that happens to, the last time the constellations were organized in that manner, there was a global cataclysm.
Right.
So it's like, they're not usually organized like that, but when they are, this is when it was basically go time.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
and
like
it
a
lines up with the Younger Dryas.
And it's, okay, and where do they think Younger Dryas did hit, and what do they think the damage was?
So I think it was a northern hemisphere impact. I think you're mostly looking at ice impacts onto the what was the Laurentide and Caldera ice sheets covered most of like North America and Canada. I actually think that some of the Great Lakes region, Randall's doing a lot of really good research into what could be actual impact formations in the geology of the northern United States and Canada today. Because the other thing is we know that that's where a lot of the meltwater from these glaciers came out, right? This is the evidence for... Have you guys ever been up to the Scablands, Eastern Washington State?
No,
you know about this place?
I've seen the videos. It's crazy.
Amazing. These giant coulees. You're talking one of these coulees, just one of several of them.
What's a coulee?
A coulee is like a canyon but with no water.
Yeah.
So it's like this giant, like think of like the Grand Canyon, but much super wide, 1,000-foot high or 800-foot high.
It's also a
walls.
racist term for Indians in South Africa. So I got a little bit uncomfortable when you kept saying it. But continue, sorry.
It's with a U in it.
Okay, all right, got
it. But it's it's the channeled Scablands, and it's basically the outwash of this water, this tremendous floods. We know now that this all happened at the end of the Ice Age, but it completely destroyed that environment. It carved up, it ripped through this land. You're talking about a single one of these channels, and there were multiple of them. It's like 50, 100 times the volume of all the rivers on the Earth at once.
Oh wow!
Just almost like a billion cubic feet per minute at where it all gathered up. It's just the catastrophic flood in this. It just tore through it. The flood. So where it's carved that channel, the actual water was probably 300-400 feet above that, and it just ripped through here.
All the national parks in the United States of America are just remnants from the latest cataclysm.
America.
Cataclysms make some cool shit.
They do.
Like this is stunning.
Yeah.
And if you go down to, where was I, in like southern Utah and stuff like that, you see these like, I mean, even, they're not cataclysms, but
Bryce
when you
Canyon
see, exactly, like the
Zion.
damage from, the water damage from canyons creates some like stunningly beautiful
And why
things.
can't it just be like gentle erosion over millions of years?
Well, that was the argument for a long time until you had guys like J. Harlan Bretz was a catastrophist. And then Randall Carlson's doing a lot of good work in this space. And now this, at least up here in the Challenge Scablands, they have swung around. So it's a long story. It comes back to religion, funnily enough, because the story of religion was always catastrophism. Right? What's the story in the Bible? It's Noah's flood. It's the Great Flood, right? So that was always where we got our answers from. So you have the age of enlightenment, the age of reason starts, science has its beginnings, geology emerges as a fledgling science. And for something like 60, 70 years, a stated goal of geology was to get as far away from the catastrophism of religion as they could. So think of it as like a massive overcorrection. They said, they went out there and said, you go out and you have to explain every feature we see on the landscape with gradualism or uniformitarianism, which is the gentle, slow, erosive processes that we see in place today, like the stream slowly eroding stuff, hills and shapes taking form. So that's what ends up in all the textbooks. And some stuff is still explained like that, and it's frankly nonsense. So, but now we're sort of coming back in the other direction and going, you know what? Some of these landscapes and features are the result of catastrophic flooding. And at least up here in Washington State, they're like, yes, there's still arguments going on. Some people think it's like 50, 60 floods. Randall thinks it was 1 or 2. I think Randall's right. He has significant evidence for it. There's all sorts of problems with like how ice dams reform. It's kind of a convoluted, long story. But this does align, this model, this environment aligns with like the meltwater pulses. So everything wraps up and shows that in that period, that Younger Dryas period, when we had all this ice on land and it all ended up in the ocean in a big bloody hurry. It's like, you need an external source of energy for that. If you took that lump of ice that was on top of North America and you plopped it down in the warmest waters at the time, say somewhere around Indonesia, it'd take 30,000 years to melt.
Yeah,
it would still be here. But it melted in an incredibly short period of time. So you need this source of energy. Turns out, then you combine that with all of the strata work. So it's like the macro scale and the micro scale. The macro scale, we've got these catastrophic landscapes, the work of Randall Carlson. The micro scale, we've got all the work of the Comet Research Group, 160 plus peer-reviewed papers looking at the science. So we've narrowed in, we're like, God damn, this was a violent period. It probably knocked our species. Graham says we're a species with amnesia for this very reason. It's a great analogy. So you turn all of this around. I think that's why catastrophism, the Younger Dryas, is the key that unlocks this longer story of civilization and human history, because now you've got all this other evidence, these stories that are embedded in religions and origin stories and cultures that speak of earlier times. Every culture out there is like, hey, our ancestors went through either flood or fire. It knocked them down. They had to rebuild. It's like, is this all bullshit?
Yeah, there's a flood myth in Mayan mythology. There's a flood myth in like Christian. I'm sure there's Indian. I mean, everyone.
Yeah.
But and this makes sense if these comets were hitting more regularly, and then you were experiencing these floods.
Dude, I think some of these tales include basic eyewitness accounts of these floods. If you go to the other vectors directory on there, you can pull up a few. The Mahabharata literally talks about swarms of meteors coming out of the sky. Revelation 8 and 9.
What's the Mahabharata?
It's Mahabharata, this Indian Hindu story.
Oh, okay.
Hindu epic, yeah.
Yeah, go to other vectors in there.
Oh, in this one?
Yeah. That's the third one down, yep.
And I guess my question is, if there's a gap between Hinduism's 4,000 years old, the Younger Dryas period is as many as what, 12,000 BC? So that's
No.
14,000 years old.
12,000 BC? No, just 12,000 years
12,000 years,
12,000 years ago, sorry.
12,000.
So there's that 8,000 year gap. How does that story hold up for 8,000 years? If theoretically we went back to, and I'm not saying this to pick at you, I'm just curious, and I'm sure you've thought this through. If we went theoretically back to a Stone Age, how did we maintain these eyewitness accounts for 8,000 years?
Well, I think they get deified, they get put into stories. That's like the oral tradition, that's how we transmit the data down through time. Not only, I think, are there eyewitness accounts and stuff like this, I mean, Revelation 8, Mahabharata, all of these stories, I think it's an oral tradition. And there's also evidence in all of these stories for celestial knowledge, for that same processional numerology I talked about. There's a whole book called Hamlet's Mill. It's a complicated book, but they essentially showed in that from all these cultures all around the world, there seems to be that same processional numerology, these 72s, this stuff that correlates to the cycles of the heavens and the cosmic world, is also encoded in these tales, in some cases in civilizations where we know they had no clue about this. All of it points to like a common ancestor, a common progenitor of this story.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, like, to be fair, some of these things, the biblical flood, the flood of Moses, for example, might have been related to an event that happened called Burkle Crater, which was about 5,000, I think it was 5,000 BC or 5,000 years ago. There may be smaller events that have generated floods. Like, this isn't the only impact. Like, Burkle Crater was it would have flooded the Middle East right around the right sort of time. It landed in the Indian Ocean. 800-foot tsunamis hit Madagascar and the coast of Western Australia.
Yeah, I probably fucked India up too.
Yeah,
it would have washed up north, yeah. So I think that a lot of this stuff gets transmitted down through time with oral traditions, and it gets put into these stories and characters and deified because that's how we retain that data and transmit it down through time.
And what was the timeline of the pyramids, the Great Pyramids, and the Younger Dryas?
Well, I mean, they're not. If you ask the Orthodox Egyptologists, they're not related. Like Younger Dryas, 12,800 years old to like 11,600. Pyramids started about 4,500 years old, according to the mainstream story. So 2,500 BC.
But it's possible that those pyramids could have been made 30,000 years ago.
It could be, or at least the structure, the base of them, a form of them that was there. Like I said, you can't really. It's very difficult to distinguish what the dynastic Egyptians did to it. They probably worked on them, repaired them, maybe have done some of the work. We just don't know. That's part of the challenge of looking at this stuff.